Hello, hello, I'm Casey,
And I'm Fallon.
and this is
Render the Darkness. Okay, so in this episode, I will be talking about The Curse of the Exorcist. Now, The Exorcist first came out in theaters in the United States on December 26th, 1973. The movie was written by William Peter Blatty, I want to say.
Sounds good. I'm not sure.
And the movie was inspired by his book he wrote in 1971 that had the same name. Now, that book was also inspired by a true story based off of the exorcism of a 14-year-old boy who was never really identified but was called Robbie or Roland Doe.
I did not know that was based on a true story.
Yes, it is. And I actually plan on doing an episode on that exorcism at a later date.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, so there are plenty of things that happened during the filming that led many people to believe that the movie was cursed. There have been deaths, a fire, and multiple injuries that make a lot of people think that way as well. They say there are at least 4 deaths that have been associated with the movie, and people believe that is proof of the curse. There was even a murderer that had part in the film as well.
Oh, that's an interesting note.
I thought so myself.
Do we find out the name of said murderer?
We will.
All right.
So let's go ahead and start with the injuries that occurred on the set. The first one we'll talk about happened to one of the main stars of the film, Linda Blair. I watched a documentary series called Cursed Films. It was on the first episode in the first season. Now, this was a really good series. They talk about a few different movies that have a curse surrounding them. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend watching it. I will link the site that I watched it on in the show notes.
Perfect.
For one familiar scene, Linda was strapped into some equipment that would move her around in the bed the way that the director was envisioning. Linda said that, quote, "In this particular take, the lacing came loose. I'm crying, I'm screaming, they think I'm acting up a storm. It fractured my lower spine." She also said in the film that they didn't take her to the doctor, and that exact scene was in the movie.
Ooh.
So just think about that for a minute. All that screaming and crying, that was real. So she must have been in so much pain. She was only 14 at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even imagine what she was feeling or what she must have gone through to even finish that movie.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I never knew any of that.
I also didn't know any of that.
Now, the second injury is that of Ellen Burstyn.
I would say Burstein.
Burstein?
Or Burstein.
Burstein? Let's go with Burstein. I kind of like that one.
Okay.
Who was playing Reagan's mom. She ended up with a spinal injury as well. In the scene where Reagan is slapping her mom across the room, Ellen was in a harness at the time. During the first shot, the director, Friedkin, didn't think the pull was brutal enough, so he talked to the guy that was in charge of pulling the rope, Phil Noble Jr., editor-in-chief of Fangoria, stated that Friedkin said, "Give it to her." He wanted him to pull a little harder on the rope in order to get her to fly across the room the way that he wanted her to. That's the actual take in the movie as well. So if you remember that scene, or if you have to go back to look at it, you can see on her face the pain that she's experiencing. It's just crazy to find out that it was all real and not just her great acting skills.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine what...
I wonder if, like, when something like that happens, do they have to sign off and give permission for them to use that take? Like, does the actor have to say, "I'm okay with you using my real life trauma or pain in this scene"? Or is that like a contracted thing, I wonder?
I don't know. I'm going to say probably back in that time, they probably didn't have as much legal stipulations.
Yeah.
So they probably just could use whatever they wanted because they probably owned it because they did film it.
Yeah.
So for the rest of the production, though, she had to use crutches. And it said in an interview for The Guardian in April 2018, quote, "I said, he's pulling me too hard. Billy, Friedkin, the film's director, said, well, it has to look real. I said, I know it has to look real, but I'm telling you, I could get hurt. So Billy said, okay, don't pull her so hard, and as I turned away, I felt him signal the guy, and he smashed me on the floor. I expected Billy to yell, cut. Instead, I saw him touch the cameraman's arm to move the camera closer, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs. Through my screams, I said, "Turn the fucking camera off." In another interview with The Guardian, the director Fredkin stated that, quote, "Ellen Burstyn never lost a day's work, let's put it that way. There was no insurance claim, and she's worked steadily ever since. I'm sure she was hurt by the fall. You fall on your backside, it's going to hurt. But she wasn't injured. And for that, I say thank God." Okay, so I'm going to sit in here and say, like, how would he know if she had gotten injured or not? Wasn't his body, couldn't feel the pain. So, yeah, no, I said, you wouldn't know, Mr. Man.
I'm sorry, that was an inappropriate laugh at timing, but I was reading what she had typed on the screen, and she actually was answering her own question.
Yeah. Okay, so people would call Fredkin a two-fisted director if he needed a reaction like jumping because they were supposed to be scared, and in that particular take, he would fire a gun off behind them just to get that reaction.
So kind of like a very Stanley Kubrick kind of a approach.
Sure. I don't know who that is.
Moving on.
Okay. There were a couple of other injuries that happened on the set that there isn't a whole lot of information about that I could really find. One was of a technician that lost his toe, and a carpenter lost his thumb.
Wow.
Now let's talk about the fire. One night a fire started that was caused by a bird flying to a circuit box and damaged most of the set, but strangely enough, Reagan's room wasn't touched. This actually set the production back by quite a bit, and it caused a 6-week delay. After the fire, a Jesuit priest by the name of Father Thomas Birmingham, S.J., was asked to exorcise the set. How ironic is that, though, you know? Anyway, he couldn't actually perform an exorcism, so he blessed the set instead. A Jesuit priest is a member of the Society of Jesus, a Catholic order of priests and brothers who are ordained and take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They're actually the largest male religious order in the Catholic Church with over 16,000 members all over the world.
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had no idea what that was, so I had to look it up, and now we know.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day. Now, there are some stories that say projecting the film would invite demons into the theaters. There was a trailer that had to be taken down because it was supposedly causing seizures. They were hanging on to the controversial nature and taboo, saying that if you watch this film, you're going to get messed up. There were people who would pass out while watching the movie. A woman from the United States actually passed out and broke her jaw.
How did she break her jaw? Did she fall on something?
I'm guessing she passed out, like maybe hit the floor.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe one of the theater handles, the bars or whatever. She did win a lawsuit against Warner Brothers for an undisclosed amount of money. Now, in the UK, they say that St. John's ambulance staff went to the showings of the movies to help people that became upset. And it's also said that the rumor about the film being cursed was used as a marketing tool.
I could see that.
Yeah, because, I mean, if you hear about, oh, this movie's cursed, people are going to flock.
Especially in a movie about an exorcism.
Right. Okay, so here is what is said about the deaths that surround the film. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, there's supposedly 4 deaths related to the curse of the film. The first one that we will talk about is Jack McGorwan, who was cast as Burt Dennings in the film, who was an eccentric film director, died at the age of 54 due to complications of influenza that he had contracted during the London flu epidemic in 1973. Before the film was ever released.
Okay.
Now, this one name I'm probably going to mess up, and I am so sorry. Vasiliki Malarios? That's not really looking about right. Who played Damon Cross, mom, or Crass, sorry, in the film, passed away at her home of natural causes at the age of 89. Now, Linda Blair's grandfather passed away while she was filming, and Max von Sydow, I'm going to say, sorry again if I messed that up. He was the man that played the Exorcist. His brother passed away on Max's first day on the set. Okay, so there was also an incident where Jason Miller's son almost died in a motorcycle accident. Now, Jason Miller played Damon Crass. Okay, so now there were other rumors that a total of 9 people died during the production, either directly or indirectly. There are a few I didn't mention because I didn't want to say anything that wasn't correct. Like I said, there's 4 that they're saying is directly related to the curse, but I mean, there's a couple, like I just said, that died of natural causes, so I don't know if I would actually contribute that to the film or not. Now, one interesting fact that I had no idea about was that there was a murderer in the film. In 1972, William Friedkin went to the New York University Medical Center, or the NYUMC. He was wanting to see some medical procedures in person because he was thinking about putting some of them in his movie.
Okay.
He was invited to watch a cerebral angiography. At this time, there were not any HIPAA laws. HIPAA didn't become a law until like August 21st, 1996.
Cerebral angiography.
Yeah. At this point in time, these procedures were done by making a hole in the person's carotid, thank you, artery to be able to insert a catheter that was then injected with a contrast agent that would make it to where you could see the blood vessels easier on an x-ray. While they were doing the cut for the catheter, there was a small window of time before they actually inserted the catheter that the blood was flowing from the tube with every beat of the patient's heart. Now, Friedkin thought that was perfect for his movie, and he wanted to show that exact procedure in his movie. So he went out and came back in with his crew to shoot the scene right then and there. They ended up blocking off the radiology department for 2 weeks back to back. 2 weekends, back to back. It was one of the first scenes to be filmed where Reagan is being looked at medically to see if there's a medical explanation for her behavior.
Okay.
Matt Miller, who's a writer, editor, and a digital storyteller, spoke with many of the people that were involved with making that particular scene. One of the people was Barton Lane. He was the person that invited Friedkin to watch the cerebral angiography, and he's the one performing the procedure in the film. So everyone that was assisting with the procedure that day, Friedkin wanted to be in the movie. Mr. Lane said that he remembers hearing the crew talking about how they were going to be able to get Reagan's head to spin like the angiogram later in the movie. That is the scene that becomes one of the most remembered scenes in the movie. That famous head spin.
Oh, yeah. Pea soup.
Yep. There's a technician that was working that day named Paul Bateson. He was the chief radiology technologist who worked with Mr. Lane for 4 years. Now, Paul does a lot of the speaking in this scene, showing his great bedside manner. This is one of the things that many of his co-workers really liked about him because he used this same manner with his real patients. Now, when Reagan is wheeled into the hospital, he helped put her on the table and attaches the wires to her shoulders. When the movie shows a close-up of Reagan's face, off camera, Paul can be heard saying that the cut to the artery is going to be painful. Mr. Lane says that he would characterize Paul as being, quote, quiet and very nice to his patients, end quote. All right, now let's talk a little bit about Paul Bateson. Paul was born on August 24th, 1940. He was raised in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, and he was the son of a metallurgist. A metallurgist is an engineer who is trained in the extraction and refining and alloying and fabrication of metals, according to vocabulary.com. In the 1960s, he served some time in the Army. During this time, he started to drink heavy because he was bored while he was stationed in Germany. Unfortunately, this is what caused him to struggle with alcoholism for the rest of his life. He moved back to Lansdale and stopped drinking after he was discharged. In 1964, he moved to New York City where he met a man and they started a relationship. Now, during the course of the relationship, there was heavy drinking, a lot of parties at their home or the weekends in Fire Island enclave of Cherry Grove. Now, content warning here. Fortunately, 5 years later, his mom died of a stroke and his younger brother died of suicide. And close to the time that The Exorcist was released, Paul started to drink more. The drinking started to affect his social life and later told the Village Voice that, quote, nobody likes a drunk, end quote. His drinking got so bad that the NYUMC fired him. Now, after he was fired, he was able to get small jobs like repair work, cleaning homes, and collecting tickets at a theater that showed adult films. He did start going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was able to stick to it for a while and was involved in another long-term relationship. Fortunately, Paul started drinking again in 1977, but heavier than before. Later, he said that he would drink a quart of vodka a day. Now, this had major impact on his social life again, and he said, quote, "After a few shots, I'd shave and get dressed intending to go out, but after the vodka, I had no energy left to move," end quote. The nights he was able to leave his home and have a night out, he would frequent leather bars, which he started going to in the 1970s with some people who called themselves bikers.
What's a leather bar?
And I looked up what a leather bar was because I too had no idea. Now, it was like the term leather in this scenario apparently is a blanket term for a large array of sexual preferences, identities, relationships, structures, social organizations loosely tied together by the thread of what is conventionally understood as sadomasochistic sex, according to GLBTQarchive.com. Horatio Street, he had been beaten and stabbed to death. Now, the police thought that maybe this was a robbery where the suspect was looking for cash or jewelry because those items could be taken quickly, and a struggle pursued because there was evidence of a struggle. Maybe it was an accident, but nothing of value was actually taken from the home. So they ruled that out fairly quickly. There's no sign of forced entry, which means there's a good chance that Addison knew his killer. And there were lots of beer cans and liquor glasses that were still half full. Now, a friend of Addison named Arthur Bell, who is a LGBT activist, author, and journalist, wrote an article in the Village Voice saying the murder of gay men are not taken seriously by the police very often. He said that the police and media see the cases as sexual encounters gone wrong. Now, 8 days after the murder, someone called Arthur Bell and said that they were the killer, and said that the killer did this to tell Bell that, quote, "I like your story and I like your writing, but I'm not a psychopath," end quote.
Interesting.
In the early morning of September 14th, the caller said that they went to the Badlands and went to a bar on Christopher Street. There they had met Addison, who had offered to buy them a drink. With the caller being sober for about 3 months, they accepted the offer. That drink became many more, and they were also taking poppers and taking cocaine. Now, poppers is a slang word that refers to recreational drugs that belong to the alkyl nitrate family. People would often breathe in the chemical, according to WebMD. Now, around 3 a.m., they left that bar and went to the mine shaft, where they continued their party. The caller said to Bell he didn't know how well liked his new friend was. Air quotes around friend. He stated, quote, "I didn't realize he was such a superstar and I wanted to go home with him," end quote. After they were at the club for about 2 hours or so, they ended up taking a taxi back to Addison's home. When they got there, they still continued the party with more drinks and cocaine and had slept together around 7:30 a.m. The caller said he realized that Addison didn't want anything else from the relationship. Caller said, quote, "I needed money and I hated rejection. So still intoxicated, I decided to do something I have never done before," end quote. Once he incapacitated Addison with a frying pan from the kitchen, the caller recalled that he stabbed him with a knife, but he didn't hit the right side of the chest.
Oh.
Now, once Addison was dead, he took the cash that was on him, which was $57. Today would be worth $287.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And his credit card, passport, and some of his clothes, and he spent that money on alcohol. Now, during the call, the person said that he was the son of an orchestra leader, had a wife, and a teenage son. He said he loved the arts, and when he was a child, he wanted to be a dancer. Now, he talked about wanting to be able to atone for the crime he had committed, noting that the phone call took place on Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement. He said, quote, "But I don't want to give myself up. I wouldn't be able to practice again. I'd lose my license," end quote. He never did tell Bell what the license was for because he thought he could be found that way.
So he's literally calling this person to make sure that he reports the story right while also trying to not give himself away? Was that what he was doing with this phone call? Because he's giving him a lot of details.
Yeah, I think he was just wanting to, I think that's kind of what he was doing, trying to make sure that he got the story right, and also to, like I said a minute ago, like atone for it.
Yeah.
So.
But, yeah. But he also said that, he didn't want him to report him in a way that made him look like a psycho.
Yeah.
So he wanted to make sure that he knew that he had some accomplishments and things like that as well.
Yeah. Bell made a phone call to the police, and they said it was the first solid lead that they had gotten on the case. The person on the phone had known about the missing credit card, which the police did not make public. He also talked about a white substance that was found on the floor of Addison's home as Crisco. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about what that was used for, but you can use your imagination on that one.
I don't want to.
Yeah,
But I'm gonna.
I don't blame you, but
I don't have a choice.
The police at this point hadn't been able to identify the substance and never made that information available to the public either. Now, the detectives that were on the case thought that he would call again, so they waited at Bell's home with him. Bell did receive a phone call, but it was from someone different named Mitch. Now, he claimed that while he was at St. Vincent Hospital, he met a man by the name of Paul Bateson. But he thought that wasn't his real name because he knew that he also used the name Johnny Johnson. He said that Paul used to be an x-ray technician, and he called him one day and confessed to the murder. Now, Paul was arrested in September 1977 at his home located on East 12th Street. When the police arrived, Paul was drunk, and they asked him if he knew why they were there, and he pointed at Bell's article and said he assumed that was the reason why. He did end up giving a written confession that resembled what he had told Bell on the phone. So he was charged with second-degree murder and kept in jail until his trial.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, in an interview that he did with Bell while he waited for his trial to happen, Paul said that he pled not guilty and he thought the verdict would turn out the same. When he was arrested, there was an investigation involving a series of other murders of gay men in the past 2 years. Now, the police thought that they were murdered by the same person because of the similarities in each case. The bodies of the 6 dismembered men had been found in bags floating in the Hudson River.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. The bodies had never actually been identified, but the bags supposedly had wording that connected them to the NYUMC's neuropsychiatric. And the police said that the bodies had been dismembered with a knife by someone who knew exactly what they were doing.
And just for clarification, the NYUMC is the New York University Medical Center, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the investigators that were on the case started to publicly say that Paul was now a suspect. There was an interview that occurred at the same time of Friedkin's film Killer Joe. I don't know if you've heard of it or not. I haven't.
I have not.
But he stated that Paul admitted to killing Addison. But then he said that Paul had decapitated Addison and threw his body parts that he had bagged into the river, which is not true. So I'm not sure exactly why he would say that.
Okay.
But Paul did say that the prosecution offered him a deal that if he would confess to the 6 murders and other unsolved murders, he would get a shorter sentence. He told Friedkin he didn't know if he was going to actually take that offer or not.
So Friedkin was still pretty active with this guy even when he was in jail?
Yeah, he was, I guess, just trying to get more information out of him.
So is he trying to, so he was trying to use him basically as like a part of his story or something?
I believe so. I believe that's what he was doing.
Character development, I guess?
Yep, I believe that is what it was. Now, during the pretrial, Paul tried to recant his confession through his attorney. He said that he was drunk when he confessed and that he had not been read his rights. He also said that he didn't make that phone call to Bell and that the confession that he made was just facts that he had read in The Voice. Now, that was Bell's article.
Oh, okay.
Now, in early of 1979, Paul went to trial and the state submitted his confession and Bell's article into evidence. Now, he was mistaken when he thought he would have a long, drawn-out trial because he was convicted after only 4 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it didn't take them long at all. He was convicted on March 5th, 1979. Now, a month later at his sentencing, the prosecutor, William Hoyt, called him a psychopath and said that he believed that he did commit the 6 bag murders. That's what they called them.
Okay. Because they didn't have any identities for any of the victims.
Yeah. So Paul was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Now, the judge couldn't find a direct connection with the other murders to Paul, so all he was given was 20 years.
That is insane.
Yeah, now 20 years, well, 20 years to life, but, I mean, the minimum of 20 is crazy. All right, now Matt Miller, the one who wrote the article in the 2018 Esquire,
Yeah.
now he was unable to find any kind of mention of the bags being connected to the NYUMC. And he also couldn't find anything about a deal being offered if Paul had confessed to the uh, other 6 murders. So Paul actually only ended up serving 24 years and 3 months, and he became eligible for parole in 1997. So one day after his 63rd birthday in August of 2003, he was released from Arthur Kill Corrections Facility on Staten Island. He finished his parole in November of 2008, and that was the last record on Paul as of 2021. No one knows where he could be living, if he's still alive, but there is a Social Security death index that shows a person with the same name, birth date, and Social Security number that died September 15th of 2012. So, that is the Curse of the Exorcist and the case of Paul Bateson.
You rolling 2 into 1. That's awesome. I mean, the case wasn't awesome, but you rolling 2 into 1 was right. That was really
being able to connect
well
like
connected.
That?
Yeah, it was very well connected to the story. With the Paul Bateson thing and them not being able to identify anybody as far as the 6 bag murders, do you think with him working in a hospital that it's possible that they were originally like cadavers that he had dismembered? And maybe that's why they couldn't be identified because they were already deceased?
It could be, yeah. I mean, that would definitely be a possibility. Because, I mean, they would already be there and...
already recorded as dead, so they wouldn't show up again as dead.
Right. And they wouldn't show up as missing or anything like that, so yeah.
Because it seems crazy that many, like 6 people would just go unidentified.
And what I don't understand either is how he only served 24 years and 3 months after he killed a man.
Right, and even when he did quote-unquote confess, he really didn't confess to anything they didn't already have evidence for. Like, it didn't help in any way. They didn't help identify anyone. All it did was, I'm sure it gave the public peace of mind of knowing that whoever had supposedly done that had been caught.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And it allowed them to close the investigation. But as far as for the victims, it really didn't serve any purpose for the victims because it allowed them to close the case without really investigating any further. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if those 6 people are still, if it's like closed or not, or if it's still ongoing.
Okay, so they're still trying to possibly identify who they are or were?
I'm going to say they...
I understand the point of a plea deal. I understand why one was given or one would be given. It's just very unfortunate in this type of a situation for so many people to go unnamed.
Yeah. And I didn't even actually see anywhere where he did or didn't accept that deal. I mean,
okay.
They offered it to him, but like I said that...
you would think he would have to have gotten a deal if he confessed to the 6 plus extra additional ones and only served the 24 years.
Yeah, if he confessed to it, I mean, yeah.
But then again, you also said he tried to recant that later, so was that recanting accepted?
I'm going to say no because they actually submitted that confession and the article into evidence.
Oh, okay.
So I guess they wouldn't let him recant it.
Oh,
so.
okay. I gotcha. Well, that was really interesting. That was a lot of information about The Exorcist that I had no idea about, and I actually had never heard of Paul Bateson.
I have not either.
So, thank you for sharing.
Hey, no problem. I did save a couple pictures that I may, I don't know if we can actually put them down in the show notes or not, but might be able to link them, maybe. Either that or we might be able to put it like on our Instagram or, something, just to kind of see what he looks like. You can also Google him.
Yeah.
But the articles and the references and stuff will also link in the show notes.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I would definitely like to check out that show that you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, it was...
about the haunted movies or sets or... Something like that.
Cursed Films is what it's called. And I can't remember exactly where the series is.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just watched it on a particular website, but that website that I watched on has all of them that you can watch for free. So,
oh, I definitely would like to check that out. That seems very interesting. And you also did our first case that wasn't. I mean, you did put a true crime in the case, but you combined the true crime with the Exorcist story. So that's good job. You did a really good job.
Yeah, I didn't know about the murder until I started researching about the curse. So, I mean, that was kind of cool. I mean, not cool, but, it was interesting to find out.
Right. Okay. Well, as we said last week in our Friday episode, we can be found on Spotify and Amazon Music. And we have a Facebook and a TikTok and a Instagram and a Twitter or X, however you prefer to say that. We are planning on uploading 2 episodes a week, one every Tuesday and Friday. We have an email. It's renderthedarknesspod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you guys. If you have any case recommendations or any stories of your own that you would like to share, or comments or suggestions, we're open to any and all of those things, and we would definitely love to hear from you, and we appreciate you spending your time with us today.
Yes, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the support.
And we are
Render the Darkness.
Bye.
Bye.